Good afternoon, Graham. Now this is a bit better, isn't it?
It is.
For our
much cooler.
ICA Cogitations. A little bit cooler. Nice in the pool though.
It's lovely here at Daydream Island.
And we've got the Whitsunday Passage, I suppose, behind us, haven't we? Or
That's
one of
it.
those other islands anyway. Actually, it's a little bit better than the yacht. Anyway, this afternoon, what I'd like to do is to have a little bit of a chat with you about policy-based access control and where that sort of fits in that whole authentication and authorization space. Now, can you perhaps give me an idea about what that's all about?
It's the future. Where we're heading is having a business unit being able to manage the access control for their staff. So what we need is a mechanism to allow somebody without IT background to be able to go in and set up the policy as to who on their staff can actually access the systems in the department. And it needs to be run by the department, not by somebody in IT.
So like a departmental administrator would be the person who would create this policy set of policies.
That's right.
Access
then
control.
When somebody in that department tries to access an application, the application would go to a piece of code called the policy decision point to say, this person is trying to access this application, are they allowed to? And the decision point would respond with a permit or a deny. And then they would be able to get their access based on that. But everything is controlled through a centralized policy administration system.
Okay, so this sounds great, but obviously, presumably, you're going to make an access control decision based on not just who the person is,
Absolutely,
but perhaps a range of other. What's the sort of things that you might want to take into account in creating such a policy?
Well, for instance, if the application is a finance application, you might want to restrict access to the general ledger, to the finance manager. If it was an HR application, you might want to restrict access to the HR departmental manager. So you can decide what access a person will get depending upon their role.
Now, can we do that also for, let's say, accessing documents or file stores? Can we do that?
Absolutely. So
Okay.
in this circumstance, you would have your documents in a secure area, a protected area, and then as somebody tried to access them, the system would come to the policy administration point and say, who can get access to this? Well, be the decision point and say, can this person access this particular document?
Okay, now how does this sounds great, but I mean, here am I, and I'm using my browser or whatever, my phone, I'm going and trying to access a document, but how does it get from, let's say, the file store to the decision point? Is there a process? Is there a protocol, or and what actually enforces this at the, if you like, the document store?
Well, it depends what the document store is. So if, for instance, the document store is SharePoint, typically what an organization will do within the document store, they'll have a column that will determine the gradient of a particular document. So a document might be restricted, or it might be confidential, or it might be top secret. Those have to be set up. Then when somebody comes and tries to access that document, SharePoint would say, does this person have top secret certification? And they would go to the main directory, and for us SharePoint it would be the Active Directory, and see whether that person did indeed have an attribute to say top secret before granting access to that document.
So I think, so basically, as I understand it, what you're really saying now is that there is this enforcement point that sends the request saying this person is trying to access this document, and what it then does is like a combining algorithm or something which basically pulls those different bits of information, the person's identity, their role, perhaps their rank, their clearance, and the appropriate classification of the document, and then makes a decision based on those things whether the person can access it or not access it.
Correct.
Is this the way that we overcome the problems in government and defence when we've got people with, let's say, a security clearance of, let's say, secret, but their nationality is, let's say, New Zealander, and then we've got a label on a document which says Osteo, Australian eyes only? Is that the way that we can enforce
Absolutely,
policy?
because then one of the attributes they'll look at is citizenship, and for a New Zealander they would not grant access to it.
Right. Okay.
But it's not just government and those type of organisations, although it's critical for them. But even organisations, corporations today need to move into this entitlements management area. It's the future.
Now, can we apply that in health as well? I mean, one of the problems we've got today is, we've now got this electronic health record which we're deploying here in Australia, and one of the concerns I have is, well, if I'm a patient, maybe I don't want to allow certain people to have access to my health record. Is there a way of achieving that with this sort of
Exactly
policy?
the same principles.
Right.
Now, Australia is not actually following that type of mechanism for the current patient record system, but it's entirely possible. So all industries, insurance is another major one, where you want to give special access to an insurance agent based on their credentials. So entitlements management is where it's all going.
And is there a standard, perhaps?
Absolutely. The XACML, that's the Extensible Access Control Markup Language. That's the standard for entitlements management.
Graham, thank you very much indeed for this. What I'd really like to say for you, this is a lot better than being out in that boat, out in that coral sea.
Thanks,
Thank you
Andrew.
very much. Okay, bye-bye for now.